The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of upcoming classes.
For every veteran, there is a story about a calling to serve, to fight for the freedoms of the American people. And every story has a struggle, a sacrifice, and invisible wounds. Warrior Watts programs help veterans recover from PTSD and invisible wounds through exercise, nutrition, and connecting with other veteran leaders. It is estimated that 22 veterans die each day by suicide, and another 30 veterans die each day by substance abuse. These are preventable deaths. Warrior Watt is committed to fighting PTSD through fitness, nutrition, and community.
All right. Welcome back.
Misfit Nation, the Misfit Nation show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, Stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_Misfit Nation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
All right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation show in our Sunday after dinner edition. I know some of you are glued to your TVs watching Kansas City and the Bills duke it out for the AFC Championship. Congratulations to the NFC East Championship winner, the Eagles, today, as they will face the winner of that game. Tonight, we have no bad news on the first responder front, so that's a good thing. Let's still keep those in Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and, of course, those suffering from the fires in California in your thoughts and prayers. And if you can help if you can. If you can't, just support them any way you possibly can. Tonight, we have another good one. We have an Army veteran. He's a shining example of resilience, leadership, and purpose-driven living. His diverse background spans military service, real estate, photography, and impactful worldwide advocacy work, and illustrating his dedication to overcoming adversity and helping others to do the same. So without further ado, let's welcome Eric Donoho to the Misfit Nation. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, how's it going, Rich? I appreciate you having me on.
It's awesome to have you here. Like we were talking in the green room, you're only about an inch and a half away from me, so yeah, we're almost in the same sphere. So it's pretty cool. And I'll be up here. Me and Lacey from our Tuesday crew will be up close to Indianapolis here. I told you, February 10th. So maybe we get together, have some dinner or something.
Yeah, we'll have to try to figure that out. About 45 minutes away from it, so not that far at all.
So, Eric, I just gave a 2-sentence introduction on you. I want you to tell the Misfit Nation more about you from as far back as you want to go through your service to how we got here.
Yeah, so I, this is always the hard part for me because I never really am the out front kind of guy. I always have enjoyed being behind the scenes and let other people kind of take the lead on that. What I would say is I joined the military when I was 26 years old. I was working in advertising and marketing. I wasn't liking what I was doing. I was in a radio station. It was fun, but it wasn't fulfilling. I went into a recruiter station to do some radio advertising sales for them. And when they didn't recruit me, that was I was like, well, I'm 26 years old. Why are you not trying to recruit me? We're in the middle of a war. And so I went back about a week later and I was like, what's up? Why didn't you try to recruit me? And they're like, well, why would we recruit you? You're in a great job and you're doing this. And anybody who knows you work at a local radio station, you don't make good money. I made as much as a PFC coming into the military as I was doing there, as a base salary. So for me, it was like, I'm not really making that great of money. So long story short, it was the idea of wanting to see what I was made of and what I would be capable of handling. And would I be able to hack it like my old man did? So I knew that I was approaching an age where it was time. I either did that or I moved on in my career in sales and marketing. And so at 26, I joined the military. I went our U.S. Army. I went infantry airborne. And by the time I graduated from airborne school, I was at 4th Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, which was a brand new brigade that was being stood up in Alaska. And then I was sent to the 3rd of the 509th Airborne Battalion, part of that brigade. And I started out in Charlie Company and then eventually moved on to the Scout Sniper Platoon. We deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom in October of 2006. And then we came home about 15 months later, all of us as a whole. And then by the time I came home, I'd been blown up too many times, is what they told me. And and I was given an option of either something like finance or retirement. And I just didn't see finance being an option for me. So I took retirement and started a whole nother transition of trying to figure out how you go from that to being the primary caretaker of your kids to, all these next things in life that no one really prepares you for.
That's a journey right there. And kudos to all of you coming back, especially at the time you guys went to Iraq. That was right during the second surge, actually. The second surge right there when Petraeus had his momentum going there and pushed forward with that surge. And you guys went, and if you all came back whole, well, as numbers, you came back whole, but obviously not whole and total, I guess, fully healed or fully.
Yeah, and I think anytime you're in war, you're going to find yourselves, or people are going to find themselves needing healing after that, at least from a spiritual and soulful perspective, if not just from a, hey, what did I just see, witness, and have to partake in? And that sort of thing, we like to glorify on in Hollywood and on TV, but at the end of the day, there's a real cost for what you actually have to witness and what you have to take part in.
Yeah, you definitely see like those you were older when you went in, but the younger guys, 18-year-olds, 17 through 19-year-olds, mostly 18 up when they deploy, you see them age rather rapidly over there. And they either grow up or they fall to the wayside. And especially in the infantry, you have to be on it. You have to grow and you have to be alert at all times. So being an 18-year-old in combat is very hard. It's hard on the mind, body, and soul. So you really need that spiritual give back when you come home. And I'm just glad a lot of our brothers and sisters are seeking help now. A lot did not do that back then.
Well, I didn't. I mean, so I came home, and I'm like any other grunt. I love to complain about the military, but I loved it, right? So it was like you would be like, "Oh, you're going to get out, so you should be happy about this." But I wasn't. But I faked it like I was because that was what you did, right? You didn't let people know, like inside you're terrified because you're like, I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing here. I like this. And now I got to go start at the bottom somewhere else. And on top of it, carry all this baggage that I just took on, not just military wise, but also civilian wise, and what happens because life carries on while you're at war. So, all of that, I was like, oh my God. And then you get out and, I guess for me, it's like anyone else. I always have seen myself as a sheepdog. So naturally, I gravitated being law enforcement or gravitate towards law enforcement and trying to apply for law enforcement. But with traumatic brain injuries, with PTSD for getting out, nobody's hiring you. But in my head, I didn't want to believe that there was anything wrong. And so I was like, if I pretend long enough, I'll get a job. Somebody will hire me. And the reality was all that did was just keep burying things. And then as life kept happening, my foundation that I had built my life on just started to crumble because I didn't have the ability to carry that weight anymore.
Definitely. And like you said, being the profession you were in, you can complain all day to your buddies. You complain all day in the team, the platoon room, or the scout sniper section room, but you don't bring it outside. You don't complain above that. You stay strong, you stay firm, and you made.
I complained to everybody. Okay. I was just that guy, right? Like, it's like, what do you mean we got to fill 2 sandbags to go in and eat? What is this? Like just everything. But there's a backstory to that, right? So the backstory to that is when I left to deploy in October, my wife was 7.5 months pregnant. And by the time that I had landed, got on a plane in Fort Richardson, Alaska, and arrived at Camp Beering, Kuwait, I had a Red Cross message waiting for me when I got off the bus that we had lost our son, David. And so I was right back on a flight. And because of great leadership, was back, in time for the stillbirth with my wife. And then we buried our son at Fort Richardson National Cemetery. And then the Army, was so awesome. I know a lot of people complain about their time and all of this. I was really lucked out and had just amazing leadership. And they were like, Eric, this is huge. You should stay home with your wife for 6 months. And I was like, please don't make me. And in the beginning, it was like, we all trained together. The platoon needs me. I'm just the radio telephone operator guy for the platoon. They didn't really need me. They had 3 others, like we had 1 for each section. I really wasn't that special, but I knew I was inept in being able to give my wife what she needed at that time because I was in the mindset of training to go to war. And so like all I was feeling was anger, and I knew what she needed was love and compassion. So I hid behind that deployment and within weeks, rushed back over there. So the little begrudging and the complaining, it was a little bit of all these different things that were mixed in. It was just like everything was like, oh, looking back on it, you know, I had one of my good buddies was like that too, it was in our platoon, Dustin. And so we probably fed off each other more than we should.
Probably just made it worse for everyone else having you two next to each other.
Yeah, it really did.
We have a question from a fellow Indiana resident, or I guess the former resident of Indiana, Jake Holland, our Tuesday crew guy. During your radio, did you happen to work for Q95?
I worked for 95.3 WAR out of South Bend, Indiana. It's no longer there anymore. It was a classic rock radio station. And it was awesome. I got to meet Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson, John Fogerty. I mean, you go down the list and I was at these concerts. And so it was a really cool job. But it just wasn't fulfilling. And honestly, I didn't really have a bond with any of the people I worked with. It was just something I went and showed up to.
Okay. So you didn't have that passion that you have for what you're doing now.
No, not at all. It was just, honestly, it got me free drinks in the bars in the evenings. So it made me it was a cool factor.
You got to meet some cool people. So
right.
Yeah. that raises up here, pay down here, and then finding your passion after that is what really matters in life. We're always searching for that one thing that keeps us motivated. And I think after you hit so many walls, you rediscovered your hope and purpose. What was the turning point for you?
December of 2015, I found myself, I had just buried everything for so long that it had just surfaced in my life where I had created so many boxes trying to control everything, because if I controlled it, I could keep everything under lid. And, when you have a family and you have a wife, that kind of needing to control the scenarios and the situations, it doesn't bring people together. It actually drives people apart. So I had found out that my wife was, contemplating divorce, and she wasn't talking to me about it, which, is serious when they're researching attorneys. And we had just moved back to Indiana. And so luckily for me at the time, she had to wait 6 months until we had gained residency. And, most people, that would have been like, hey, so that was your turning point. I'm going to turn it all around. And that was my turning point where I was like, see, everybody would just be better without me. Wow. So in December, after I took my kids to school, daycare, and dropped them off, I came home and I tried to eat my Glock the entire day. And every time that I had that Glock in my mouth and I tried to pull that trigger, the trigger would not pull, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I did. And so I get frustrated. I pull the Glock out of my mouth. I clear it. I take the weapon apart. And sure enough, everything's fine. Put it back together, dry fire fine. And I went through that process a number of times, but it never fired. Wow. And, and some people will say, well, maybe you just weren't squeezing hard enough. My Glock has a pretty easy trigger squeeze on it. I don't think that was the case. I was pretty committed to leaving this world. And that happened long enough until I glanced over at the stove and realized it was time to pick up my kids. And I realized I had failed at doing that. And I didn't want to fail at picking up my kids. And so I tabled it, and I was like, I'll come back to this another day. I went and picked up my kids. 2 days after that event, I learned my very first platoon sergeant in the Scout Sniper platoon. And the first guy I was with on my very first IED had taken his own life. So literally right at the same time. And I found myself really angry with him. We had had a falling out. We hadn't talked in a long time. Part of it was my fault. Part of it was his fault. It was all, stupidity, stupid shit. Truthfully, I don't even really remember what it was all about. And so I was mad. I was angry. I'm like, how did you just do this, right? And, I felt like as a friend, I was mad at him. And then the irony that I was about to do that to my friends and my family. And so I was watching Rocky, and he was talking on TBS late that night. I couldn't sleep. And he was talking to his son outside the restaurant that he has. And he looked at his son and he's like, life, I don't want to butcher it, but I probably will. Life isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and get back up and keep moving forward. And it was in that moment that it was like a light bulb. I'm like, I just, after all these hits that life, was hitting me with, between the loss of my son, the loss of friends in combat, what you see in combat, the coming home, the loss of friends to suicide, the loss of friends to illnesses and cancers and all of these different things. And so long story short, that was the turning point. I was like, obviously I've made it through every single incident that should have killed me. And so I'm here for some purpose. I should try to figure out what that purpose is. I always have this to fall back to. Like, this isn't going anywhere. And so that really started my journey, of which has just changed my life from that point. I called my best friend that night, who I knew would be up in Alaska because of the time difference. He answered the phone. I just was brutally honest. I didn't even say hi. I just said, Brent, I tried to eat my Glock 2 days ago. I don't want to die. And the next thing I know, he didn't know what to say at first. And then all of a sudden we both just let it out, and he helped me figure out a path forward. And that night was really the precipice for where I'm at today.
Wow. And it seems like you're I think the 6th or 7th veteran I've had on the show that a divine intervention happened, and something other than you caused you not to take you out. And that it's amazing that all of your stories kind of mirror. And you're the second one with a gun that malfunctioned, a dude that takes care of his weapon 100%, just like you do with your Glock, and you have the trigger squeezed down, probably down to a pound of pressure, 1.5 pounds of pressure or whatever. And it didn't work. And it didn't work for a reason, because you're meant to do better. You're meant to do things for others and have that purpose and passion. So after you hit that wall, after you started an uphill climb now, what is your passion now?
I spend my time doing a few different things, but the real passion and where I'm at right now, and quite honestly, I'm shifting all my business focuses. I'm stepping back from real estate, and I'm moving into this full force, which is to talk about moral injury and to help educate veterans about moral injury and really the larger society. And the reason for that is, after I've written my book, for your viewers, I've spent the last 6 years in Capitol Hill working and volunteering with different veteran service organizations as leadership fellows, and then as advocate warrior leaders, training veterans to become advocates on the Hill to help pass veteran legislation. I've helped pass 6 major pieces of legislation, including the 988 Suicide Hotline Act, the PACT Act, for which I was at the signing in the White House, the Elizabeth Dole Act that just helped. All of these I've had some role in. It could be as just minimal as going around to different senators and congressional offices, sharing a story or stories about how and why this legislation is needed. And for me, that work has just been really invaluable in both finding out who I am as a person and as an individual, learning about how our system and our government works, and this VSO community that is really responsible for caretaking us as veterans and making sure we're represented and have a seat at the table. And so I take and have taken great pride in all of those accomplishments and doing all of those things. Along the way, everybody is, encouraged to write a book. And for me, the idea of doing that was, again, more feeling called from God. And so this book isn't about sharing scriptures or any of that. It is about dealing with this moral injury. And so in the process of, when the book came out and we're getting it all out there, I started to do a whole lot of more data research on moral injury. And that's when I realized that moral injury, I believe the data shows, is the major driver behind veteran suicide. And for the last 15 years, we haven't done anything to address it or talk about it in any real way. And so once I started looking at those numbers, and once I started talking with, senators and congressmen and women on the Hill, and learning that none of these VSOs are in their offices talking about this or the numbers and the data of it, made me begin to question, like, what are all the motives here? What are we doing? And are we doing the right things? And so for me, I decided to get real specific about what I can do to help the veteran community, which is to talk about moral injury and to talk about it in a way that I think, all veterans can relate to.
That's outstanding. And who were you with when you went on the Hill? Was there a specific group, or you just went kind of up there and linked in with people?
So the majority of my time I spent with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, otherwise known as IAVA. And then I had a little bit of time, about a year, with Wounded Warrior Project as both an advocate and then being trained latter part of that year as a warrior advocate leader. And a lot of that was pulling me over because I stopped working with IAVA. Like any organization, when you're there, though, you do work collectively as a whole. So I have friends at the DAV, I have friends at WWP, I have friends at, Military Order of Purple Heart. If you go around that whole group that you see testifying on, typically, I will likely know someone at one of those organizations.
Outstanding. And we got a question from at Veterans Voice. Eric, how did your military experiences shape your passion for helping others, especially through initiatives like the 988 Suicide Hotline and the PACT Advocacy?
That is a great question. And it took me a while to figure out how to explain it to somebody in a way that I felt, but I think the best way that I can explain it is I always felt that calling to be that sheepdog, the one that is out there helping to protect the flock. And when I came home, that was where I was driven. That's where I was going. And for the longest time, my headset was that you can't be a sheepdog unless you're carrying a gun and a badge or, some sort of authority behind it. And the reality is there's lots of ways to still be a sheepdog without having to carry a gun or a badge. And this is just one of those ways that I can be a sheepdog for other sheepdogs. And, that to me is an honor from that standpoint. So what my military service taught me was the one thing that filled my bucket as a person was knowing that I was doing something for the greater good, serving something larger than myself. And so when I started that journey all those years ago to this point, what I knew was that I needed to make sure I was doing things that would be filling that bucket up.
Definitely good answer. And when you're up there on the Hill, and we all seen the pictures of the PACT Act as it was signed. There's so many other groups. There were so many groups up there that were up there at that time for the historic day when it was finally signed. And that's not just for when you deployed. It's for thousands and thousands, probably millions of veterans who went through before.
Rosie and Leroy of Burn Pits 360. I mean, the amount of work that those two alone did, and then when you look at Danielle and Danielle Robinson and their daughter, and what a trooper she was. I mean, because she would, you know, I don't want to get choked up about this, but I mean, you know, to see his little girl go around and ask, you know, people to do the right thing, which should have been the right thing in the first place. Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. It didn't really, it shouldn't have had to even need to be done in that way. But, you know, there's all varying different degrees to all kinds of different things. And so, you know, most recently, I think we find ourselves in an era where we have to even start looking and holding accountable these VSOs that I'm talking about in DC. And here's what I mean by that. Most people aren't aware of this, but on Veterans Day, 10 of these organizations took $1 million each from TikTok for an initiative called Veterans Voices to move veterans to TikTok's platform. And the problem that I have with this is I don't have a problem with veterans want to go on TikTok on their own individually. That, you know, go on TikTok. I don't care. What I have a problem with is that none of these organizations, all of these organizations represent and help write legislation on Capitol Hill for veterans. So having donations coming from our number one adversary already strike me as odd. But then when you look at the fact that none of these organizations employ anyone smart enough to know if these apps that they're using are feeding back information to you know, CCP on our veterans in itself is just shameful. And almost every single one of these organizations, you know, intentionally tried to keep this donation quiet as long as they could because they knew the backlash from veterans, especially older veterans like ourselves that, you know, are astute and read things like national security briefings and things along the line that explain what it is they're going to do. And just so viewers, what I'm about to say is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but, you know, hear me out for a second. So you collect data, like, for example, one of the organizations was IAVA, another was Wounded Warrior Project. Wounded Warrior Project is in case management. Every time you talk to a representative from Wounded Warrior Project, they are annotating everything about that conversation in the computer. And then, you know, you get off the phone and every single time. So every single person who is a member of Wounded Warrior Project has a file on them of everything that they've done and interacted with, which means that if CCP gets that data.
Jake Holland.
All right, we got a caller on the
To
line.
accept,
Eric.
press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Jake, can you hear us? Jake, you with us? Jake. Guess he got dropped. Good, Eric, keep going.
I can hear you on the TV. I can't hear you on the phone.
How about now?
Hello.
You got me? Anything? No, he dropped. All right. Go ahead, Eric.
And so the major problem with this is that if you're collecting data on where everybody's head is, you know, from these individuals, this allows China to conduct psychological operations on veterans, i.e., meaning they can start creating programs that can encourage or push a veteran at risk into one direction. So a veteran who might be suicidal might be targeted and pushed one way or another. That's a way our adversary could target at us if we go to war with them. The things that we're not thinking about are long term. Right now, China's playing chess and our US politicians are playing beer pong, and we're not holding anybody accountable for anything. And so, you know, and it's not just this, like, let's take a look at as a whole, right? So I'm going to give credit to these VSOs that, you know, you got some time, you got to catch up to these wars. But for the last 15 years, these groups go in front of Congress every year in March. It's called the Joint VSO hearing, where the VA committee and the Senate committee come together, and all these VSOs come together and they testify to what they need or what veterans need to bring down these numbers of veteran suicide and all the problems that we have at the VA. And just being, you know, clear-eyed, not being a jerk here, for 15 years, they've come in front of these organizations, and for 15 years, every administration has given these guys everything they've asked for. And the VA budget has doubled and just continues to grow, but yet my friends are still killing themselves.
Yes, 100%.
My friends are still dying because nobody says, oh, well, yeah, you're only 46, but you should be getting your prostate checked because of what you were exposed to in Iraq. And you don't need to go into the VA public health system to do that. That's called administration. You have their emails. You can push this out to them. This kind of information that we're not getting into veterans' hands because of one reason or another, and I have my theory on that too. But so the passion right now for me is, you know, number one, talking about moral injury, and that's the biggest driver for me, mainly because I'm just tired of seeing leaders of my generation feel like there's no hope for them to get better when there actually is. And so real quick, for those who are out there, because I know we're running short on time, if you've been in PTSD for years, PTSD therapy for years, and you've been putting in the work, legitimately putting in the work, and things are not getting better, you may be dealing with the wrong injury, and you may want to start looking at and doing some research on moral injury, which moral injury is a spiritual injury to the core of who you are. It manifests in all the same ways that PTSD does. They usually and can run concurrent, which means if you're treating, and here's the kicker, the treatment for PTSD will not help make the treatment or the injury for moral injury get better. Sorry, it's a little late tonight. I'm a little tired, but the point of where I'm getting at is if you're in that and you're doing that treatment and you're not getting better, it's because those tools aren't going to help you get better with moral injury. What helps you get better with moral injury is finding your faith in something. Doesn't have to be in what I have faith in. And like I tell some of my friends, it can just in the beginning be a faith in a piece of property that you can go out to, have peace, and fish at. And maybe that's all that your faith is buttoned up in the beginning, but it's the start of something. For me, I put my faith in my wife, and that allowed the rest of what, you know, God put in me a long time ago to help cultivate over the years. So, you know, moral injury is important, but it's also important to call out what's happening on the Hill, which is a whole lot of money is being pushed in different directions that are not actually helping veterans.
Definitely. I think that answers kind of what Jake was asking when he tried to call in and ask He said, "Do you think politicians are actually trying to help, or just paying lip service to get votes for veterans?" And I think you just answered.
I think politicians are generally wanting to help. I think that you have groups on both sides that some will say it's an open check and they're like, whatever you need. And others are like, hey, we got to be fiscally responsible for this. But I haven't run into anyone who's like, no, I don't want to help. I think the problem is like, when we look at groups, for example, SVA, Student Veterans of America, they're consistently and always in there advocating for the post 9/11 GI Bill. Each session, there's a bill that comes up every session that would allow veterans who are more entrepreneurial and have a skill set in something else. So let's say you're a carpenter coming out as a CB and you want to start your own construction business up, right? The biggest challenge you're going to have as a veteran is capital. So instead of using your GI Bill to go to school to get a degree for what you don't want to do, you're going to attend a small business administration boot camp. You're going to create a plan. You're going to get your licenses, and then you're going to use that the GI Bill for a one-time grant that allow you to start your business. And then on top of it, you get your monthly allowance for 1 year, which gives you the time to, ramp up the business and make money. Every year, that bill gets killed by the Student Veterans Administration or Student Veterans of America and the DFW. And so, last year when I got done listening to their testimony and hearing all of this, and then knowing that this bill got brought up, and I'm a veteran entrepreneur who's really that's my secondary focus, is helping veteran entrepreneurs. Why do you keep killing that? And so I dug into the numbers on this. $10.1 billion. Why? That's how much money went to the post 9/11 GI Bill in 2023. I'm going to be conservative here. It's actually less than this. 10% of that, we'll say, went to the actual veterans. The rest of that went to colleges and universities.
It's insanity right there. And
now here's the funny thing. Look at who the biggest donors are to the SVA and VFW.
There he is. Yeah. It all matches up. Yeah. So, obviously. And I think what you're bringing to light, hopefully other people do their own research and understand this. Those nonprofit organizations, NPOs or BSOs, they still got to make money to pay their people. And everything they do is that bottom line. They may say they're nonprofit, but they have to make money to pay the people that they're doing. And that's where a lot of this gets lost in the clouds.
And they all have an agenda. And
yes.
And while overarching, the idea is that their agenda is to help veterans. I mean, when we really look at this, you have to ask objective questions and step outside it from the emotional side of the coin. And you have to say, are we affecting change in the most amount of veterans or active duty that we can? And the reality is, when we get into the numbers, we push a lot of money towards more of the smaller groups within the organization or within the veteran world than we do towards the majority, which is why we see why we don't see any decline in the suicide numbers.
Right. And that's the moneymaker, having those numbers up there. And like the one thing that really ticks me off is the Till Valhalla t-shirts. Those guys just make money off those t-shirts saying they're helping suicide. Where's that money go?
Right. Well, and then that's what we have to ask all the way around. And so, and it's from the t-shirt makers to the nonprofits who are out there providing first line treatments, right, to the VSOs that are helping craft the legislation. There is zero accountability, and there are over 48,000. I'll go. I heard that number the other day. I'm going to go with the one I know for sure that I can source. Just 40. There are over 45,000 plus veteran nonprofits in America. And so, when we look at all of this, we have to ask, are these services are we providing the best services that we can, or are we gearing money towards our specific niche and then, sucking it up in ways that aren't measurable and aren't equitable or fair?
Right. We have two more questions from listeners in the chat right now. First off, all your listeners on Twitter right now, thanks for jumping in from Eric's page. That's awesome that you guys are on here with us. If you want to jump on and become part of the Misfit Nation, go to our YouTube, youtube.com/@the_Misfit Nation. We'll grab you with open arms, and we have a lot of guests like Eric that are passionate and have a purpose in life. So thanks for joining us tonight. Eric, this one's from Moral Healing Now. How has your experience with moral injuries influenced your advocacy and your message to veterans about finding healing and purpose?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to try to do it as efficiently as I can.
Okay.
The moral injuries that we all deal with, and it can be any traumatic situation that anyone faces. It doesn't have to be just veterans, but those moral injuries, like any challenges, I believe happen to bring us closer to God and our purpose. And that's how we choose to see them. And so when I started looking at life from that lens, rather than like, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person. And I shifted that to looking at this and saying, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? What faith am I supposed to have in this scenario that you're going to take care of me and this situation? And how do I continue to serve those around me? Because what I've learned is when you have storms that affect you, one of the best ways to deal with all of that negative energy is to use it to serve someone else. And so when we put all that negative energy into something good, it changes how we see that scenario. So the moral injury and the healing from moral injury has allowed me to have a lot more patience. It has allowed me to, remain a little bit more calm when I'm looking at somebody who's, I can tell, lying and, by the numbers, talking to my face and saying, we're here to help veterans. And I believe they are, but we get caught up in an agenda sometimes that we fail to think that we got to step out of, right? And I'll put it this way. We live in a really peculiar time frame from a world standpoint.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, not to be an alarmist, but we could be one decision away from a world war. And when we find ourselves in that time, right, we have to look at and start asking all of ourselves this collective question. Who are we, or what are we going to put our faith in? And right now, we aren't putting our faith in government. We're not putting our faith in country. We're not putting our faith in each other. And we're not putting our faith, in large in part, in any spiritual sense. And so as a core being that is made up from a spiritual sense, there's a lot of fact-based research that goes into that. If you don't have those things in your life, you're just going to be circling around and angry. And so healing from this has allowed me to see it from the advocacy standpoint, that I can say, hey, look, I get that you're upset. I get that you're angry. And I get that you have some things you need to work out. But who you need to work them out with is not with me. Who you're angry at is not with me. You're angry at situations that you have no control over, nor can you change at this point in time, because they're in the past. So if you try to want to make amends for this, you have to look to something beyond yourself and higher than yourself, Otherwise, you're never going to be able to solve that. And that's what took me to God. And in doing that, my whole life has changed. I'm not going to say I don't have anxiety. I'm not going to say I'm a perfect follower. I don't, and I'm not. I still trip over my feet all the time in this. I'm still learning in this. I still am trying to learn to turn the other cheek more than I need to. Like all of these things, but the fact that I'm being willing to be open about it and say this is something we need to talk about, because 71% of active duty service members identify and say that they have some sort of religious affiliation. And according to the Freedom Institute, that moves to over 90% in the veteran community. And yet we have zero programs within the VA or DOD that deal with moral injury and this spiritual aspect. We have spent $0 on moral injury over the past 10 years and created zero programs. On the flip side to that, the second highest rated group for suicide, moral injury, by the VA's own research out of New Jersey, puts moral injury, people who are suffering from moral injury, at the highest risk for suicide. So I have a page that's all sourced in this. I can send it to you if you want to put it out on your page. But the next group underneath that only makes up 6.1% of the active duty force. And in that 6.1% of the active duty force, $29.6 million was spent on psychotherapy and gender affirming care for less than 1% of that group to combat suicide. And this is why people, when we talk about this, this is not an attack on that group. They need help too. Every group who's suffering needs help. I'm not here to pick and choose winners or losers. What I'm saying is if we're going to provide that support to a small group, we ought to be providing that support to a large group. And the reason we don't push it is because the majority of those VSOs on the Hill have a no God policy. And as soon as you start talking about moral injury, you will have people say you need to have the separation of church and state. Yet when I was in country and I would watch my brothers in arms get ready to roll outside the wire, I saw 90% of them praying. And yet nothing exists for when we come home to deal with those harms of what we saw or what we encountered. Sometimes, which are just, can be little too, right? Walking down the street, seeing a guy beat a woman because, he didn't like the, right. And you can't do anything to interact or interject in that because that's not your fight. That's not why you're here. ROE doesn't allow that. And but as a man,
culturally,
yeah.
So that's a big thing. A lot of us had to see, and bite your tongue, or I guess cross-sling your weapon and hold it tight against you without pulling the trigger on a dude that was doing something stupid to a woman, because it's not something that's normal to us, but it's something that they thrive on there. And
right.
It's sick. Yeah.
And yet, where do we deal with that, those harms, the not doing anything and knowing that you didn't do anything, right? It's those that haunt most people more than the I had to do something because my life or my brothers or sisters to my right or left was in jeopardy, right? Like those decisions are kind of a little bit easier to deal with. It's the ones where your hands are tied. Yep. It's the ones where you can't do anything. It's the Afghan fallout. It's you could just go down the list of things that we've endured as a community, and and where's the support in it? And where are the VSOs asking for it? So that's the fight I'm in right now. It's been an interesting one.
I feel it right now. I feel your passion.
Yeah. I'm not the most friendly. I'm not the most wanted person on the Hill right now in the VSO community.
but I'm sure when you get up there and speak in front of your Indiana delegation up there, they listen to you, and hopefully their voice inside of that.
The politicians are really interested in trying to create and make change. And
Yes.
what I love that's happening right now is that you're seeing more and more veterans starting to sit on the Veteran Affairs committees. And in that, you're able to actually start talking about these real systemic problems. And you have to talk about them openly, right? Like, healthcare, that's going to be a mess in itself. But can you tell me one person you've met that's gone into the VA and has come out and said, man, that's the best hospital I want to go back to. I want to go have my surgeries there.
I have not met that person yet. No.
And yet we keep pouring money into it. How much money are you going to pour into a system that has yet to be fixed? Because the truth is, this is going to get piss off a whole lot of people, but the system itself was designed to be an administrative system, not one that provided healthcare services. Now, I'm not saying that what the VA provides isn't valuable. That's not the argument I'm having. I'm having the argument of, in any business, if you try to focus on too many different things, you're not going to be successful at anything. So you focus in on one thing and you get really good and successful at that. How about you get good at the administrative side first, and then talk about the healthcare side and get people to real doctors who can help them, that aren't just there to pay off their student loans and don't give a shit about the veterans that they care about, because the healthcare systems and the hospitals actually can be sued and be held accountable. Right. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way to go. I'm just saying, we're at a point where you have to objectively say, we've been doing this stuff for over 15 years and there hasn't been any movement. I haven't seen anything, any studies, some very small movement in a direction. But for the amount of money that we're throwing at this, you should see it. You should see a major, major decline. And then what are we going to do for the other, for the next group that is at 15.5 suicides a day, which are 14 to 25-year-olds, not veterans, just 14 to 25-year-olds in society. If we can't figure this out without throwing billions of dollars at the problem, how do we save our youth?
Right.
And so all of these questions that I'm asking, I'm just saying, okay, if these programs work, show me. I'm all for vets getting service dogs if that's what's going to help them with their PTSD and get them out in society, get them moving again and off the couch. But how many of those vets, when they lose that service dog, end up going back and needing a second service dog?
It's a never-ending problem for most vets, and as we're coming down to the last couple minutes here, cut you off. So, yeah, your passion is obvious. The audience was obviously in there with you. There was a few more questions, but we're gonna have to cut them off tonight. What I want you to do right now is give the Misfit Nation 3 things you do every day that you feel makes you have a successful day and maybe a successful life.
The first 2 things that I do every day is I make sure that I wake up early. And when I say early, I mean 5 o'clock, before anyone else in the house is up. And then I take 15 minutes and I just sit with God. And sometimes that is just me sitting there. Sometimes that is me asking for his guidance during that day, but that centering. Some people will just meditate, but that centering for the day, trying to get clear about how you intend to live your day. And then the third one is smile. Even when you're having a bad day, smile, because you never know when that smile is going to turn someone else's day into a good one.
Outstanding. That's a good one there. And I put that in my book, 13-Step Guide to Success. because everyone likes to walk and look down at their phone. If you just look up 3 inches, look at someone in the eyes, smile, maybe say hello. You just made that.
Oh, yeah.
You might have changed their life that right there. You might have made them not think about doing something to end it all. You might have made them think about helping someone else help themselves. And I think that's something we all have to worry about and think about as we move forward in life. Eric, that was, again, a great answer. Great tips. Great chat with you tonight. How can the audience get in contact with you? What's the best place to go for them to get with you?
They can go to ericdonoho.com. They can find my book, Canyon of Hope, From Darkness to Dawn. You can find it anywhere you get your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you can get an autographed copy at either ericdonoho.com or canyonofhope.com.
Outstanding. Eric, thanks again for taking some of your time on a Sunday night to hang out with us, and I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing in the future.
I appreciate you having me, and thanks again for all that you're doing to get out the word on so many amazing veterans doing awesome things.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a good night.
You too.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Did you serve in the military? If so, you can obtain a free lifetime pass to more than 2,000 federal recreation sites. These sites are located across more than 400 million acres of public lands, including national parks, wildlife refuges, and forests. The lands host activities to fit any lifestyle: hiking, biking, fishing, camping, and much more. Gold Star families are also eligible for these free lifetime passes. Plus, they cover entrance fees for a driver and all passengers in a car, or up to 3 additional adults at sites that charge per person. Obtaining one is easy. Just go to the National Park Service website, nps.gov, or the National Park Service app.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are
Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.